Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, August 26th, 2013 Washougal City Council meeting. Would you please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Boger.
Here.
Councilmember Plinsky.
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee.
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay.
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel.
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Councilmember Freeman should be joining us partway through this meeting. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, our first order is a proclamation for our 2013 Day of Service, September 14th, 2013. Whereas the giving of oneself in service to another empowers the giver and the recipient, and whereas the City of Washougal recognizes the importance of volunteers in our community and encourages all citizens to be part of positive action through volunteer service, and whereas our community faces vast new challenges now more than ever, and good people from all walks of life are needed to come together to use their skills for the common good, and whereas self-sacrificing individuals mobilized to help others can make a difference in the lives of children, adults, and the elderly throughout our community, and whereas the City of Washougal fosters creative leadership and civic engagement and promotes public-private partnerships to expand the scope of effectiveness of volunteerism. Together we join in to answer the call and to recognize the impact community volunteers have had on the city's history and the integral role that they have in shaping the future. And whereas September 14th, 2013 has been dedicated as a day of volunteerism in Clark County with a goal of enlisting 500 residents to volunteer throughout the community. Now, therefore, I, Sean Gard, Mayor of Washougal, do hereby proclaim September 14th, 2013 as the 2013 Day of Service, and call on all citizens of all ages to join in and get involved in community service on this day and throughout the year. By volunteering, we strengthen the connections between our neighbors and our community, and we become more understanding and compassionate citizens. Mr. Suggs, would you like to come up and accept this?
You bet. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Would you like to say a few words?
Well, what started out as a fairly local day of service about 3 years ago has turned into a county-wide day of service now with most of the cities on board and the county on board. We want to reach out and to serve the community has been indicated. We see it as a way to also honor those who lost their lives in September 11 and let them know they're still in our thoughts and minds. The only really thing I need to know is you going to be there?
Mm-hmm.
8:30. We'll be at the parking lot. And we hope to have other groups with us. It's been gone out to all the churches. It's been gone out to civic clubs and organizations. And we have different groups that are vying for projects in other parts of the county. And we are just as important as I've worked with the city and further agencies over here to do some of the things that will be needed on that day. So we hope to accomplish a lot and hope to involve a lot. Any questions? Yes, Dan?
Refresh me again, where do we meet?
We're meeting at the north end of the parking lot at Washougal High School,
Thank you.
Over by the tennis courts.
What time?
8:30.
Yeah, okay.
We hope to be on our way a little bit after 9. Bring gloves, shovels, wheelbarrows.
Stuff.
Thank you.
Ernie, thank you for all of your efforts and for everybody that you bring together on this thing.
Yeah.
It's appreciated. With that brings us to the first opportunity for public comments. Any members of the public that would like to address council? Yes. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jim Tillman. I don't know how to do this properly. I have concerns regarding the sidewalk projects.
Jim, if we could get your address, please.
1412 I Street. I got a couple handouts here.
Okay.
It might help with my
Sure.
presentation. Share, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you could maybe hand it to Rose over there so she can make it part of the record. Thank you.
Okay. Just a little history. I was living, this is about Elizabeth Park, the sidewalks down I Street and such to get to Elizabeth Park. I was living there where I am today at 1412 I Street, and Elizabeth Park was developed with a grant to build neighborhood parks. The city of Washougal thoroughly, it kept everybody in the loop, and we all got to give input and stuff for it. So, and the entrance to the park technically is on H Street. They're running the sidewalks down I Street. Well, I have an issue with that because when it was all initially done, the sidewalks were not put in because the neighbors really didn't choose to have them. And the entrance, the main entrance to the park was put on H Street due to the fact that there's a sixplex. It's a horseshoe-shaped park, and there's a sixplex in the middle of it. So the driveway for the sixplex comes out onto I Street. We tried vehemently to get them to route it out onto H Street. That was just not a possibility because of emergency services. They could not get in and out from that side. So that being said, they were out painting up our streets. We took and finally I called down to find out what was going on. Mr. Charles talked to me, and he told me that they were putting in these sidewalks to make it safer to get to the park with the grant. And I says, well, if safety is a concern, you're best off going down H Street because H Street is a dead-end street. I don't know if any of you know the 14th I intersection there, but it's a dog-legged intersection. Let's see here, I got it. Anyway, it's a dog-legged intersection. It's very narrow, very, very narrow. And you have to slow way down. There's got two stop signs, but the 14th Street at that point is not even one lane road. It's barely. Fire trucks can't get around it, and it's just it's a mess already with all the added traffic coming in. So I tried to talk to him about that, and he was very adamant about the fact that, and we got a notice from the city the other day that we are going to get a sidewalk down there. I've looked at it, and the reality of it is that it would probably be safer if they came down I Street to 15th Street, went south, because it's a nice wide flat section, and hook up with the sidewalk that comes around on 15th over to H, because as you can see, I've highlighted in this what the actual address of the park is, technically. And the one with the Elizabeth Park on it, this picture here, it shows the sidewalk coming down right above where it says H Street. The sidewalk comes straight down there and straight across to the park. That street going north there has a Jersey barrier on it, so it's not a through street. It's a dead-end street. It's never going to be a street, per se, because that's technically the driveway. I Street, as you can see, is clear up under the arrow.
There's the Jersey barrier.
It's right up under the arrow there. Anyhow, I'm just trying, if the safety is the main concern, then it would make more sense to do that. The next page is a Google map of the neighborhood, and it shows that if you were to come down I Street, turn left south on 15th, and then go west again, it takes you right there. There's no grade problems. The sidewalk is already in from 14th to 15th, and almost halfway up from H to I on that side of the street. It's all newer sidewalk. And it would probably be a more economical and safer route to take, is what I'm getting to, I guess. Like I said, I don't do a very good job of presenting myself probably, but if safety is the main concern, that would make more sense to go that direction. Because, like I said, I don't know if any of you have been down around that intersection at I Street, but it's busy. They put in a whole bunch of houses down on K Street, further on I, J Street. There's a lot of new houses in that area. And you can talk to the police and the fire, and there's a considerable amount of traffic at that intersection, and it's very narrow. We've had 2 or 3 cars go through my neighbor's front yard because people think it's a chicane in a race course or something, you know. And I've had 2 different trucks hit and run out there. So, I mean, it's just, and fire and stuff it's an issue.
Jim, I think you've done a
Thank you.
good job of illustrating your point in there. Dave, could you make sure and get together with Rob on this and put that across? Okay, thank you. Jim, thank you. Harvey?
Harvey Olson, 3903 R Street. In the preparation of the proposed 2014 budget, which by state law is the responsibility of the mayor, the 2 most important functions of government, as stated in the Columbian editorial dated August 18, 2013, are public services such as police and fire protection, then construction and maintenance of roads. Examining all 3. The roadways in Washougal are in good condition with some exceptions, mainly in older areas. Fire department is in very good hands with excellent personnel and equipment. The police department. The chief and all sworn officers are on a 1 to 10 scale, a 9+. No police department I am aware of would rate higher. They answered more calls per officer in 2012 than Camas and Vancouver Police did. All this while being 1 officer short of the 20 that are authorized. All statistics listed for Washougal include the chief. In 2012, Washougal Police had 1,281 more calls for service than Camas had, while Camas had 5,663 more citizens and 6 more police officers. Makes me, a retired Seattle police officer, wonder how the Washougal police officers, being shorthanded, can do this year after year without being burned out. I presented similar statistics of calls per officer to the mayor and council about 2 years ago, shortly before the mayor broke a 3-3 tie and voted yes to create a new staff position of aide to the mayor and city administrator, salary just a few thousand less than what a beginning police officer would make. At that time, the police department had only 18 officers responding to calls, which included the chief. Some would question the wisdom that the mayor displayed choosing an aide for the administration's benefit rather than adding police officers for the safety of the citizens. These examples, among many, illustrate that just by getting more votes in an election, a person without qualifications or experience can be mayor of a city and take on the responsibilities and authority that Washington state law gives to that elected position. The time has never been, nor will it ever be better than this year to change from our present strong mayor Whig council to a legislative council city manager form of government, which would be more responsible and responsive to the needs of Washougal citizens. Then hopefully the police department will be funded to the authorized 20 sworn personnel. I believe this would be only one of many benefits for Washougal with a proposed form of new government. Thank you for the time, sir.
Harvey, I'm assuming then you'd be in favor of us,
Pardon?
I assume that you'd be in favor of us increasing the number of officers.
I have been for some time, Mayor.
I'm glad you're in agreement with us.
Well, you haven't done a thing about it for over 2 years.
Harvey?
We're still 1 short.
No, we're not one short, Harvey. We have all of the officers that are authorized in the budget that the council sets.
In the budget, but it's authorized for 20, sir.
In it-
And there's
no.
only 19.
Harvey, in addition, we have added 2 officers, I believe 2.5 officers positions since I took office, trying to correct the problem. So I'm glad you're in agreement with us that we need more officers. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Anyone else?
Doris Tillman, 1412 I Street. And I want to talk about the sidewalks too. I've lived there as long as my husband, of course. And, you know, when the park was put in, it was put in for the neighborhood children from Washougal River Road to 12th Street, from G Street to K Street. So this way, they wouldn't have to cross heavy traffic areas. And it was discussed to put sidewalks in then, and they chose not to due to the people in the neighborhoods. Plus, they didn't want to encourage the kids to cross heavy traffic streets. The main entrance is on H Street, like my husband said. It was chose because of the fire access. You know, they couldn't get fire trucks in on H, so it was chosen there. You know, the sidewalks come down, the way they have it, they're showing it coming down. And where it went is right there at the driveway going back into the duplexes and the 2 houses there. It's not even gonna make it to the park, and the kids are gonna have to try and walk, and they come out of that duplex very, very fast. Right where it ends will be where the neighbor's driveway, yard has been ran into on several occasions. You know, and I don't feel that that's a proper place for the sidewalk. You know, if you do decide to put it in, are there gonna be traffic revisions? Are you gonna put in stop signs and speed bumps and stuff so that they slow down going through this intersection? You know, I'm very concerned about the way it's set up. You know, I'm not against sidewalks whatsoever, if they're in the proper place and for the proper reasons. You know, I was there when the park was put in. I was there when they decided where to exit everything and why they chose it. But I really feel that if you do put the sidewalks in there, you have to have traffic revisions for it. I'm also concerned about the stormwater runoff. You're putting in a sidewalk. There's gonna be water running off of it. We have no storm drains in the neighborhood. I mean, we have a puddle that sits on 15th and I Street now. I mean, are you gonna put storm drains in? There's not enough room for swells like you did out here on E Street because you don't have enough room. When I called down to talk to Mr. Charles, he said something about a dry well. Well, dry wells are all nice and fine, but they have to be pumped out. You have to keep them clean. You know, do we have the ability, the manpower to do this? You know, and you know, if you look at the entrance to the park, it's very friendly, very you know, there's trees, and it's a very nice entrance to the park. But I'm just worried about it. Also, you know, when you put the sidewalks in, are you gonna move our meters back? Because our meters sit right at the curb right now. Will they be moved back so that if we have to replace our lines, we're not gonna have to dig up the sidewalk? You know, they're all older houses. And if you disturb them, more than likely, we're gonna have to do repairs to our home. That's expected. You know, eventually you have to do repairs to your home. But I was just wondering where the sidewalks were gonna be. And there's, on this side of the street, there's 5 power poles there. You know, you have 5 feet. The power poles would have to be in the sidewalk. You know, Mr. Charles mentioned to my husband something about narrowing the streets if need be. Well, to me, that's not an option. There's not enough room now. Nobody has enough room for visitors to park in their driveways. They have to park on the streets. Like my husband said, our truck's been hit twice parked on the street. You know, it's just a very narrow, you know, there's not enough room to narrow the street any more than what it is. You know, I'm just kind of concerned. And I'm also concerned my neighbor have 2 very nice trees in their yard. And the sidewalk would affect the trees. You know, I mean, I don't want them coming down in a big windstorm because they're very nice trees. I want to know, you know, once you put the sidewalks in, whose responsibility is it for the upkeep and the repairs of it? You know, I don't I don't know if the city would do it or you'd want the homeowners to do it. Because it's not my sidewalk, it's the city sidewalk. I was just wondering who'd be for the upkeep. Now, the second reason, when I talked to Mr. Charles, he told me the second reason was to connect the neighborhood with downtown Washougal. I, for one, don't like that idea. Because right now, I know everybody who walks through my neighborhood. I see them going through the neighborhood all the time. And you have people coming through the neighborhood that I don't know, just out walking around, following the sidewalks, walking around. And, our neighborhood's a very quiet, relaxing neighborhood. And people walk through there because it is so nice and relaxed. And it just seems to me that that would take away from that. I don't see the way the sidewalks are going to be, that it would be an improvement to getting kids to the park. And if you put it in, are you going to put lights out on Washougal River Road to help the kids cross there? Because that's a very highly trafficked road. I'm just a little concerned. I hope that you will, let me know before the end of September when these sidewalks are supposed to go in about my concerns and stuff, because I am really concerned. I want to thank you for your time. I realize this is just my opinion on a lot of this, but, I hope you'll look at it, and as a citizen and voter, I feel I need to come down and state my opinions, and I want to thank you again for your time.
Thanks, Doris. And yes, we can get you some answers.
Thank you.
You bet. Anyone else that would like to address council? Yes, good evening.
Well, my name is Albert Cunningham. I live on 1430 I Street, and I also would like to concern on the neighbor that has a very large maple tree that's been there for many, many years. And if the sidewalk is put there, it would be gone. The shade, all our massive shade plants, we have worked our butts off at our house to put many plants around the house and around the trees and stuff, and it would kill a lot of our plants. And we put a lot of effort and a lot of time into it, and I've had a lot of people stop by and say how lovely this place is. And to see that big tree gone and the maple tree just completely out of existence, and also the holly tree on the corner, it would just be devastating. And to see the animals that actually do live up there, because we see squirrels and the birds go up there and they nest up there, and there is nests there. And I just want to concern my, I would sure hate to see it go. Thanks.
Thank you, Albert. Anyone else that would like to address council? Good evening, Rod.
Mayor Rod Morris, 4050 Addy Street. Wanted to come before you tonight to let you know that I'm going to back away from my campaign against Mr. Shoemaker for council seat position number 6. I've been struggling with some health issues in the last 6 months, and I've decided that I'm going to go home, take care of those issues, and start serving the fire department again in the way that I've done for the last 35 years, and finish out my time there. I will contact Mr. Kimsey tomorrow, and also EDC. So thank you very much. I'd like to stay on the committee for the Civil Service Commission. And with that, thank you.
Rod, thank you very much for your service. Are there any other members of the public that would like to address council? Okay, not your last opportunity. We will have another one before the agenda is finished. That takes us to our consent agenda. This evening, we will be pulling item E, which is Agenda Bill 3613, an authorization for the mayor to sign the Washougal School District Turf Interlocal Agreement until our following meeting. So this evening, your amended consent agenda consists of 4 items: the workshop minutes of August 12th, 2013, your council minutes of August 12th, 2013, your regular accounts payable claims totaling $286,779.14, and Agenda Bill 35-13, a agenda bill setting a public hearing on the development agreement for the Schmid Columbia River Development Agreement. Council?
Mr. Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that we approve the consent agenda items A, B, C, and D.
Hearing no objection, so ordered. Brings us to new business, Agenda Bill 3713, a public hearing regarding an ordinance on medical marijuana collective gardens moratorium extension. Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Again, I'm before you 6 months later, asking for continued extension on the medical marijuana collective gardens. We'll talk about federal, state law, the existing ordinance that we have in place, proposed ordinance, and make a recommended action before the public hearing. Marijuana is classified as a Schedule I drug within the Controlled Substance Act, which means possession, growing, distributing, and knowingly facilitating the above, even for medical use, is a violation of federal law regardless of individual state statutes permitting such use. In 1998, the Washington State voters approved Initiative 692, which created the medical marijuana field. In 2007, that law was expanded. And then in 2011, the state legislature passed Senate Bill 5073, which the majority of which was vetoed. However, it left this concept of a collective garden for 45 plants and 10 individuals as a means to have their medical marijuana. And then, of course, in 2012, voters approved Initiative 502. There's several ordinances. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but 1706 was our original adoption for moratorium. 1710 extended that for a year, and then 1726 and 1735 each extended those moratoriums for this moratorium for 6 months. The existing moratorium will expire on September 4th, 2013. The proposed ordinance, very similar to the others, will extend the adopted moratorium an additional 6 months. It recognizes the contradiction between federal and state law. It also recognizes the recent adoption of Initiative 502, and in addition, an addition to the draft ordinance or the ordinance that recognizes what the state, how much they appropriated for this, to look at the medical marijuana field for the licensing and processing and production of medical marijuana as well as collective gardens. And again, this is not an emergency ordinance. It will extend the moratorium until March 4th, 2014. So the recommended action is to hold a public hearing, to take public testimony. If council desires, make a motion to read the ordinance by title only and pass, post, and publish the ordinance in the usual manner.
Thank you, Mitch. With that, I will open the public hearing and ask for any members of the public that would like to speak to the agenda bill to please step forward to the microphone. Second call for any members of the public that would like to address Agenda Bill 3713. And this is a third and final call for any members of the public that would like to address the moratorium extension on medical marijuana collective gardens. Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing. Council?
Mr. Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that we read the ordinance by title only.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
An ordinance continuing an emergency moratorium for 6 months within the city of Washougal on the establishment, location, operation, licensing, maintenance, or continuation of medical marijuana collective gardens or dispensaries asserted to be authorized or actually authorized under E2 SSB 5073, Chapter 181, Laws of 2011, Chapter 69.51A, Revised Code of Washington, or any other laws of the state of Washington.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we pass, post, and publish the ordinance in the usual manner.
We've got a motion and a second to pass, post, and publish the ordinance in the usual manner. Council discussion.
A couple of questions. Does this deal with 502?
Not at all.
And what's our plans on 502?
After our discussion last week, or 2 weeks ago, I'm taking it to Planning Commission tomorrow night to just start that discussion about what they would like to bring the ideas back to council of, based on the recommendations that I made.
Okay.
Any other items from council? Paul?
I would just like to comment that the thing that makes everything else absolutely irrelevant for me is our understanding that under federal law, if a city employee were to issue a license, that city employee is subject to a federal felony for facilitating a drug offense. And I don't want to speak for the rest of council, but on the other hand, I pretty much assume that they also find that that's absolutely unacceptable, that we will not put our city staff in a position of being between a federal prosecution and a city ordinance. So that said, I'm strongly in favor of this.
You realize that extends to more than staff.
Oh, yes.
It extends to you all. Any other council comments? Okay, I've got a motion and a second to pass, post, and publish the ordinance in the usual manner. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Brings us to Agenda Bill 3813, a resolution regarding personnel policy updates. Jeanette?
So as I discussed with you a couple of weeks ago, I've got three groupings of updates to the personnel policies. The first group is an update to our FMLA and EEO statement, reflecting some legal changes. The second group is updating Chapter 31 of our wellness policy to include the standalone gym membership reimbursement. And the third section is to incorporate and strike language where we've got inconsistencies and redundancies between Chapter 2A and other sections of a similar topic. So those sections would be striking Chapter 208, longevity pay, being redundant with 2.A.02, strike Chapter 702, 703, 704, and 705 of our sick leave policy, those are redundant with 2.A.04, but incorporate language from 703 into 2.A.02. Strike Chapter 802, 803, and 804 of our vacation leave policy, as that is redundant with 2.A.06, but add language into 2.A06 similar to the sick leave policy and also our collective bargaining agreements, and also the inclusion of the one non-exempt position covered by 2.A to participate in the vacation buyback. And lastly, update Chapter 2.A.05 to segment the dental and the vision portions apart and reflect our current practice of employees opting for the Willamette Dental coverage. The recommended action is to read the resolution by title only, and pass and post the resolution in the usual manner.
Mr. Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that we read the resolution by title only.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
A resolution amending the City of Washougal personnel policies to update changes in federal or state laws that have recently changed, consolidating standalone wellness policies into the wellness chapter of the personnel policies, and incorporating language eliminating redundancy and inconsistencies in the personnel policies and other sections of a similar nature.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we pass and post the resolution in the usual manner.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to pass and post the resolution in the usual manner. Council discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Brings us to item C, a discussion item regarding the 2013-2014 budgets.
right, good evening. We've been talking about putting together perhaps a budget committee or having additional meetings at council. So this is our attempt at meeting everyone's goals and starting to talk about the budget and providing as much information and getting some of the more fundamental questions answered first, such as what does that account code mean and those types of things, so that when we bring forward the 2014 budget, hopefully it'll be more clear and we'll all know what the different line items mean. So with that, our agenda will be to go through a budget guide that we put together, look at how we compare to other communities, look at the projections through 2018, again, talk about our 2014 budget strategy, and then what we're going to do is have each department head come forth and go through their 2013 budget and talk about some of the highlights, other than salaries and benefits and some of those things, to give you some context as to what each department spends money on for their budget. The Human Resources Department will start that tonight, and then the rest of us will come back on the 9th for our discussions. So with that, I forgot to hand these out ahead of time. I apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I haven't put this in the Dropbox yet. I figured there might be some comments or additions that you'd like to see, but if not, I'll get it scanned in and put into the Dropbox, and then I can make more copies for folks in the crowd if they would like some. But what we did is we kind of took a lot of information that's incorporated in various spots and put it together kind of all in a budget guide for everyone. Again, some of this information is a little basic, but we wanted to make sure that everybody had access to the same information, and hopefully this will help clarify some of the questions. So the first couple pages with the yellow underlines are the overall funds and kind of a description of what they're used for. I'm not going to read through every single one of them, but it just talks about some of the special revenue funds or some of the restricted funds and what they're restricted for. And then if you go to the first non-yellow page, it is the revenue types. And again, it's pretty self-explanatory on the revenue sides. Water sales are water sales, sewer sales are sewer sales, property taxes are property taxes. But just to kind of give a whole overall picture of the different revenues that we bring in. Granted, the utility taxes are they're not just water sewer, they're electrical, Northwest Natural Gas, telephone, all those are comprised there. So there is further detail with each one, but I kept it kind of general. And then that brings us to the expense code listings. This is where you can look to see why do we have 5021 for insurance benefits and 5046. One is payroll benefits, and then the other one is our overall WCIA, Washington Cities Insurance Authority, coverage for liability citywide that we break out by department. So I tried to give some overall description to what each one of these account codes will be used for within each individual department. So these numbers are constant throughout all of the different funds budgets, whereas other line items or other coding structures will change between the different funds or departments, but these remain constant. So therefore, you can use it as a tool with all the different departments, if that makes sense. So to walk you through that, a little cheat sheet. I put together an example department and picked on poor Mitch. It's not all of, I'm going to qualify it, it's not all of his expense line items because I didn't want to take away any thunder from his presentation next week for you. So I did narrow it down and just kind of took some of the highlights and walked through what his department would be. So again, the building permits and inspection, top line item, regular salaries is employee salaries. So just to kind of give perspective to how the budgets are lined out for each department. Again, the it's kind of midway through, actually it's toward the bottom, the 5046, Community Development Administration Insurance. Again, that's the department's portion of the overall insurance liability for the cities. So that's how much of the overall bill they pay. So that'll be in each department as well. So we were hoping to put together a tool that would be helpful for you to use as you look at the budget. I realize this is kind of a quick overview, but I didn't want to go through every line item unless you wanted to. And if you have questions or comments, I would love to hear them. All right.
Hey, Joe?
Actually, I've got,
Thank you. I'd like to say thank you.
Welcome.
This will be very helpful when the time comes.
And if you need further detail, some of them I left a little slim, but if you need further detail, let me know.
Paul?
easiest question first. What the heck is EVOC training?
Emergency vehicle operation, maybe? But the chief will be able to explain that during his department.
Okay, so that's a police, okay.
Yes.
I think they go to the PIR track.
Yep.
They get to have fun.
VOC?
And,
PD?
and then I was just curious why there's a separate item, 5123, for bulletproof vests, as opposed to being in 5023 uniforms and clothing?
They buy them through grants.
That, and I think that one might be linked to the reserve officers, so we are able to delineate what each one goes to. But I think it probably is because we do get reimbursed through the Bulletproof Vest grant. So we have to be able to account for it.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from council?
All right, moving on. I'm going to turn it over to Dave.
Thank you, Jen. The next section of the presentation is more for context. We wanted to provide some comparability context for you so that you could just see kind of how we stack up against similar communities in our state. We looked at community, well, before I get to how we came up with our comps, wanted to say that, as you can imagine, not all cities have the full service portfolio. And one of the key differences is where special districts provide services. And so there are a number of cities that are comparable to us that do not provide fire and EMS services. They're provided by districts and they're not provided by the city. And like here in Washougal, we don't provide library services as a city. They're provided by a district. So in order for us to have a rational comparability conversation, we have to try to get to apples with apples. And so we backed out fire, EMS, and library from all of the cities on the list, and we'll get to that list in a minute, so that we could then have a package of general fund services that would be able to compare. So it's not a perfect comparison in the sense that the numbers that you'll see for us and other communities have backed out these service areas if they have those service areas. Nonetheless, I think it'll be an informative review of just kind of how we stack up. So what we did is we looked at cities in Washington that were approximately plus or minus 20% of our population. So that was the first cut. Then we looked on the west side of the state, just to get some geographic congruence there in terms of costs of living and those types of things. We also looked at code cities. There were two cities on the list at that cut, that one was a first-class city with a charter and another was a second-class city. And just to continue to try to narrow it down so we could present it on one slide, we took those two communities off. And then we still had a list that we felt was too large to present to you in a meaningful way. And so Lake Forest Park and Anacortes were kind of right in the middle. And so for no other reason than to shorten the list, we took those two communities off the list. And then we included Camas, even though they otherwise would not have been on the list because of the population piece. but they are our closest neighbor, and I think it's helpful for us to include them in our comps, and I know that we like to do that on a number of different things that we do. So the list that remained after all of that is this grouping of cities. They are in ascending order of population. So you can see Snoqualmie, Ferndale, Kelso, Linden, ourselves, Centralia, Monroe, and then Camas. What you see in the third column labeled Adjusted General Fund FTE, GF FTE, are the number of full-time equivalents that they have in their communities for their general fund service portfolio, again, not including any fire, EMS, or library services. The next column over is the adjusted general fund revenue, and what that column does is it takes all revenues that those communities receive for their general fund, so whatever it is, property tax, sales tax, utility tax, B&O tax, fees, charges, all of the different types of revenue, and then it backed out expenses associated with fire, EMS, and library, so it would be an adjusted one. So if you went to find those FTE counts and those revenue counts on their websites or in their financial reports, you won't find those numbers because we had to do that adjusting that I mentioned so that we could do apples with apples. The last column is assessed valuation. We didn't make any adjustments there. These are the assessed values of these communities. So that chart has a lot of information on it. What does it really mean? So what we did is we came up, in the next 3 slides are some comparables that are used to compare cities. So now you know what communities we were looking at. They're roughly comparable to us up and down the western side of the state. And this is an FTE per 1,000 capita. So how many employees do we have for 1,000 citizens of our community? And again, this does not include fire, EMS, and library. And you can see Ferndale has basically 3 FTEs for every 1,000 employees, and Centralia basically has 5 FTEs for every 1,000 employees, and Washougal has about 3.5 FTEs for every 1,000 employees. Again, no fire, EMS, or library. So we are a little bit below the average of this group of communities in terms of our staff level for the general fund service portfolio. The next comparable data leverages the general fund revenues that were adjusted to correct for fire, EMS, and library. And so what this is general fund revenue in dollars per capita. So for every citizen that we have, this is how much general fund revenue we generate per capita. And you can see on the low end is us in Washougal at $517. It was actually rounded to regular pennies and not tens of thousands of pennies when we did this, but in this particular place, it's not rounding it properly. But anyway, so it's $517 per capita is our general fund revenue, not including fire, EMS, and then library is not part of our portfolio anyway. On the high end is Snoqualmie, and they generate $783 per capita, again, not including those areas.
Dave, do you have any idea why there's such a wide range between us and Snoqualmie?
If we go back to a couple slides prior, Snoqualmie's assessed valuation is about $700,000 more than ours, which is a large difference, but not grossly large like you see on this chart. So there are other sources of revenue that are happening in Snoqualmie. Jen is looking to see.
Probably sales tax because it's right on I-5 and.
Could be. They might have a B&O.
Mm-hmm.
They've got 3,000 less residents.
And that's part of it too. You know, their number for the property tax side, their AV is higher, and then on the denominator, they have a smaller number, so you're going to get a larger quotient coming out of that.
Oh, they got that lodge there. That's right.
They have a TPC there. It's one of the most well-to-do communities that there is in the state anymore as far as what's actually built out versus how many people are actually there as full-time residents.
It's TPC.
Tournament Players Club, Tournament Golf Course.
And the other thing that kind of surprising,
Snoqualmie Lodge isn't there. That's actually down in North Bend and around the corner, and
right, it's probably in King County anyway, not in the city limits anyway.
it's ways out there.
Yeah. But what surprises me, not so much that we have this difference with Snoqualmie, is that we're dead last in per capita
In
general
this
fund
group.
revenue. Yeah.
In this group. And we, again, this is west of the Cascade Ridge, basically. So we didn't include, there are some communities in eastern Washington, and right or wrong, we didn't include those for this comparability because we're on the western side of the state and deal with that kind of market, that sort of that I-5 corridor market, if you would. Plus or minus 20% on population, Anacortes and Lake Forest Park. For no reason at all. We didn't do this and then take them out. We just took them out before we did it, and then we added Camas in. And this is just how it came out. Again, this is corrected for fire, EMS, and library. So we get more revenue to our general fund than that number, as do all the other communities. But we had to have an apples with apples. If you include all of Camas's general fund revenues, they have a property tax levy that supports their library at 50 cents. We assess part of our property tax levy to cover fire, but several of the communities on this list don't have fire departments. So it would show us generating more revenue than they are, but it's because we're providing services that they're not providing. So it is difficult to do comparability across the board because our service portfolios are different. However, this is a normalized list, and this one is striking. What it shows is that we're very, very efficient in that we're providing the full portfolio that we are with this level of revenue compared to other communities. The most adjacent community in Camas gets about $100 more per person in revenue with which to provide this suite of services, so not the fire, EMS, and library. If you go back to the slide just prior, in terms of the staffing level, we're not the lowest on that. So that just means that some of the communities may be spending some of the money that they get per capita more than we do on things other than employees, more capital perhaps, or something.
Do all these cities have police departments? Or because I'm curious about why you pulled out, if I understood you correctly, you pulled the police department,
No, fire.
Just fire, okay.
Fire, right,
Okay.
because they're special districts. These communities are providing for public safety and
Okay.
general funds.
So this would include police?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So, yeah, the primary services in this suite would be police, parks, streets, administration, and everything else that's
Basically all general fund functions except library and fire.
right, and EMS,
And EMS.
right.
Camas has its own garbage collection. Is that general fund or is that a separate
It's
utility?
a separate utility. It's a utility, correct. Okay, so I'll jump a couple, I guess. So the third data point that we wanted to share just in terms of comparability is assessed value per capita. Now this one, there's no correction for anything. These are the assessed values of these communities divided by the population. Very straightforward. We didn't have to make any adjustments. So this one is pretty tight. And you can see, as the mayor mentioned, because the population is low in Snoqualmie, the quotient out of that factor is they've got the most AV, assessed valuation, per capita of this list of cities. Kelso has the lowest, and you find us on the low end, but not the lowest. You see Camas, other than Snoqualmie, pretty high there. Certainly, that's going to inform their ability to generate dollars for a given tax rate. So whatever the tax rate is, they're going to get that much more for the same 10 cents. If they levied 10 cents, they get more than we do, just simply because of their assessed valuation. So what this demonstrates is something that we all know and we all agree on, and that is economic development is very important, and that getting a balanced property portfolio in the community of industrial and commercial and residential property is important for a healthy community. And that's why we have efforts underway to do everything we can around economic development in order to have the kind of new construction in the community that will raise our assessed valuation and then help everyone in the community because we'd be better able to deliver the services. So that is just context. There's no actionable item from that, but it's just to give us some grounding in what our story is. This is our story. Every community is unique, and our story is unique. But it's helpful. I found it helpful to see where we are in terms of this type of information. So with that backdrop, we'd like to talk about moving forward. And so we're going to go over some information that you have already seen before, but this really is the starting line for our conversations. I'll turn it over to Jen, and she can continue.
So this slide is actually the same slide that we've seen before in the past couple presentations that we've done recently. And it's, of course, showing the projected deficit at $303,000 for 2014, again, based on our estimates, and then moving forward to $885,000 in 15, $1,000,001 approximately in 16, $1,003,000 in 17, and $1,005,000 in 18. Again, we have, as we discussed, we have strategies to address the $303,000 for 14, so we'll be able to deliver a status quo budget that's balanced without using reserves with the tactics that we've discussed. So just to give perspective for the 2014 budget, again, the assumptions that we're going with are, as I just said, the status quo budget. We're maintaining the same level of service. We're focusing on the cost containment for the projected deficit, and then closing those funds that are needing to be closed to transfer to the general fund to shore up the difference. We're assuming no new initiatives. We're assuming that council will approve the 1% increase in the levy. The assessor has all but given us our final document on positive increases in AV, so we're very hopeful in that area. And then also just for longer term perspective, the EMS costs, we are budgeting in the 46 cents per thousand in 2015, which is up from the 35 cents that we're currently paying. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the department heads walk through their 2013 budgets and expenditures to talk about some of those things that are within their department, not necessarily salaries and benefits, but some of the other things that are entailed in their line items. And Human Resources is going to kick it off tonight, unless you have questions or comments for me. Okay.
Jeanette, you're up.
Did you download it? So bombed. So it's a pie chart.
Good thing to ask. Council does not have copies of these?
This is in Dropbox?
They should be. This one is, but the other.
It's this is at the back of this thing. The
Was it on?
At least when I printed it out, it's the human resources budget piece is at the back of this.
If you go to the budget primer in the Dropbox, it should be continuing on. We just had to switch in here. I think Rose is next one.
Yeah, mine says it's a different one. Mine
Okay.
is separate.
The wrong place.
All right.
The bottom one.
Yeah.
Click on that one. See what you get. It said workshop, I pictured it as in workshop, found it.
Did you find it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's the last one listed in the Dropbox for the council meeting.
The title is workshop, so in my mind, it was for the last meeting. I just missed it, sorry. Gotcha.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to walk through the expenditures for my department.
Let's hang on a minute
Sorry.
until everybody's got it.
Oh, sorry.
Did you find it?
You want
You
to
got it? Okay.
look over my shoulder at that printed?
Okay.
Right, okay, so I'm going to go through the expenditures for the HR department. Overall budget for 2013, $189,735, of which $93,817 in salaries, and then benefits, $36,258. You can see the various benefit items that are included in that number. There's several items, items pertaining to wellness that total up $5,000. So this is for our wellness program. And just a reminder, we've been fortunate, certainly over the last couple of years since the Well City Award has been issued with a 2% discount to our regents' spouse and employee participation, that amounting to around $14,000. So we do have a net savings there in putting that program in place and generating the Well City Award. WCIA insurance, as Jennifer mentioned, each department gets a prorate of that total amount of our liability insurance, and that's my share of that coverage. Tuition reimbursement for the 2013 budget, we actually had 3 participants in that program this year. And so the budget for that being $30,000 and non-obligatory funds, $22,810. So you can see from a pie chart perspective, again, looking at those various numbers and how that is broken out. Okay, so going to the non-obligatory budget, the $22,810, $19,000 this year I had for professional services. The primary use for the professional services for my department is really legal services. That's what I budget for. Fortunately, I haven't been coming close to that, but it's certainly a money that's there to anticipate the needs that are primarily employment-driven. So when I need to contact an employment attorney that's not covered by WCIA and their pre-defense, that's primarily where those dollars are going for the employment attorneys. Travel and training, $1,650 for this year. Typically attend 2 training sessions a year. One in May, it's the AWC Labor Relations Institute. Actually, I've been fortunate the last couple of years that WCIA has paid for that tuition portion of it, so it's the hotel and such that I would incur the cost. And then the other training session is in September, and that is a membership I belong to, a Washington State Labor Relations Organization, and that is typically held up in Bremerton. Lastly, other items, $2,160 supplies, dues, descriptions, advertising, and such. And just a pie chart breaking that out in a similar way. Okay, so as Jennifer also mentioned, the 2014 budget across the board is going to be primarily a status quo budget. However, I will see you will see in my budget that I will have a lower number for tuition reimbursement. We have 1 individual participating next year, so that number will probably be in the 15,000 range that I'll be bringing forward as part of my budget. Any questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Regarding the tuition reimbursement, you're budgeting a certain amount
Yeah.
because you know in advance that you have one person and what their
Exactly.
projected costs might be for their education.
Right.
if there were other potential employees that would like to be students, say, starting mid-semester or mid-year of next year and take classes, do we say yes to that and adjust the budget, or what do we do?
Not per the policy. Council approved the policy a year or so ago, and the policy states that applications need to be in to me by June 30th. So prior to budget, so we know how to consider those funds, if you will. So the way the policy is currently written, no, we would not do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that one's also not, I guess, just an open cash register as well. We don't, if everybody puts in and wants to go through a master's program in 1 year, that's not something we're prepared to fund whatsoever. So we put them in some prioritized basis by your policy.
I suppose if the program for an individual, in this case the one individual, changed for whatever reason, they decided not to follow through with the program, or they had to slow down or whatever, and there was, I wouldn't want to call it leftover, but they weren't going to use all of that appropriation, and they had met the deadlines in the policy, I think we would probably have some discretion to consider others if they came in late in the game, if you would, because that appropriation would be there, but we don't anticipate that sort of a thing.
Other questions for Jeanette? Connie Jo?
So have we chosen a dollar figure and said we can have as many people apply as we want up to that dollar amount? What does our policy state?
That's primarily what we did for 2013. And we were able to work with those 3 individuals that put forth. But the number I'll be bringing forward will be based on the one application that I've received and what we anticipate the cost of this individual going through the program.
So we do have a cap then?
We would, because it would be based on a known amount of what we would be incurring in expenses for this one application.
But we don't, there isn't anywhere in policy where it says we'll never spend more than X dollars on tuition reimbursement. So it is, every year it's a process. And as the mayor prepares his budget with the recommendation of the team, we would look at the applications for assistance and then try to find that reasonable number, which would be appropriate in our overall budget to be supportive of this program, and try to take care of as much of that expense as we could, but it's just not an indefinite, unlimited amount. It needs to be reasonable and affordable, and so it would become prorated. If we had 10 people, we don't have $100,000 per se for this. We would have to figure out what could work given all of the other constraints and come up with a reasonable number, and then offer, upon council approval, so ultimately your approval, the appropriation can be 0, the appropriation can be whatever it will be. We would recommend something, the mayor would propose something, and we would do what we could in a prorated sense if there was more cost than the appropriation. And that's typically how these programs will work in communities. Sometimes you don't get all of your tuition reimbursed.
And what's the agreement that they make in order to get that?
They agree to do well. There's a certain limit. They have to achieve a minimum grade in order to get reimbursement. I can't remember what that is off the top of my head. And then also, if they leave employment with the city, and there's a couple different categories of that, if you leave within a year, I think it's within a year, there's a certain percentage that they have to reimburse to us, give back to us, and then if they leave in 2 years, then there's a slightly smaller percentage that they have to give back to us. The idea, that's a typical practice for tuition reimbursement programs in all sectors. An organization is investing in the education and development of its employees for the benefit of the organization and the individual. And if they take that education with them soon, then they should reimburse the organization for that.
It's only for 2 years.
Correct. It's pretty standard timeline.
Thank you.
What did you say the amount in the budget for 2014 was for the tuition reimbursement?
Probably be around 15,000 that I'll be bringing.
15?
15, mhm.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So half.
Other questions for Jeanette? Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the second opportunity in the agenda for any members of the public that would like to address council. Okay, seeing none, going to the mayor's report, I have really just one item for you. I had the day of service put in there as well, but Ernie pretty much covered that. In regard to the CTRAN board composition meetings, I emailed out to you the three proposals that were put on the table at the last meeting. Our next meeting is September 10th. So you will have a council meeting between now and then. Connie Jo, I apologize, I was thinking that it was after or before that next council meeting. But what I would like to do is get some indication from council one way or the other on if there is a recommendation that you would like to make for our vote in that, in those deliberations. Basically, the three options or proposals that are on the table, the first one is just a status quo to where Clark County and Vancouver both have 3 representatives. They also have a block veto individually on items. Washougal and Camas, as we know, share a representative. La Center and Ridgefield share a representative, and Battleground and Yakult share a representative. There also is a proposal on the table that would maintain 3 representatives for the city of Vancouver, would take the county down to 2 representatives, would add a individual seat for Washougal, an individual seat for Camas, an individual seat for Battleground, and the city of Ridgefield, the center, and the town of Yakult would share 1 seat on that, on the board. And then the third one is taking Vancouver and, excuse me, on the second one, the block vetoes are gone. Only in the status quo one does the block veto stay. The third proposal is for both Clark County and Vancouver to have only 2 representatives, and their block veto would be gone. City of Washougal would still have a representative. Camas would have a separate representative. Battleground would have a representative. Ridgefield would have a representative. And La Center and Yakult would share a representative. So those are the 3 proposals that are currently on the table that I believe the composition board is looking for input and potentially votes on September 10th on. Connie Jo?
Can you explain to me about number 2? Vancouver keeps their 3 seats, Clark County gives 1 up. But you're saying that Vancouver and Clark County would lose their block veto.
Correct.
Is that through agreement?
That's through the board rules that they have. If the composition of the board changes in any way, the block vetoes are out. Dave?
I like these proposals, but quite frankly, if the block veto was retained, any other changes are meaningless. We're still going to go wherever
Exactly.
Vancouver and the county want us to go. They have taken us down some not very wise paths in the past. So I definitely would like to get rid of the block veto. In addition to that, I'd like to reduce the number of votes they have,
Yeah.
again, for the same reason. So I'm in favor of number 3.
Connie Jo?
Well, I too am in favor of number 3 for the exact same reasons. I appreciate you expounding on that. It's as if the smaller cities don't even have a vote when the county and the city of Vancouver can veto anything that the 6 small cities ask them to do. The mood there, I sit there every month, and it's shocking the way they condescendingly refer to us as the small cities. I mean, we're not just the little sister, I think we're the stepsister too. Meaning City of Vancouver, they somehow feel like they have all the rights to take our county in any direction because they're the larger sector. And I don't think the small cities agree with them, nor does the county. And this is one of our opportunities to level the playing field, to give more representation of the smaller cities. We aren't as large, but we certainly are just as much a part of the county. And as individuals in the county, we all pay taxes wherever we shop. So they want to keep trying to use sales tax. They pay more sales tax, therefore they should have more rights. Percentage-wise, we as individuals all pay the same amount of sales tax when we shop. So I want you very much to consider that. It would be a good way to play or level the playing field.
I have some ambivalence here. Certainly, if I put a hat on that thinks in terms of what it would be like for Vancouver, which has 70% of the population in the county, and over 70% of the I'm sorry, the 40? The ridership also in the Vancouver stops is huge in comparison to the other cities, as is the revenue. So any kind of proportional representation, I think we lose that argument. So I would not be making an argument on proportionality, because I think we lose that one. On the other hand, I am frankly offended that the C-TRAN board and executive staff have a very narrow vision, which is large buses on fixed routes that go up and back. That's all they have in their mind. And in fact, when I, at another meeting, queried the C-TRAN staff on why they were so interested in light rail, it was a very narrow but certainly well thought out position. The federal government would pay essentially all of the capital costs of light rail and very little of the capital cost for bus rapid transit. C-TRAN would have to pay all of the operational expenses, and the operational expenses for light rail are a fraction of what they are for bus rapid transit. So C-TRAN said, well, our cost minimizing return solution here is somebody else pays for the capital expense and we take the minimum operating expense. You know, if you were a commodity corporation, that would make sense. But this is a public entity which is supposed to serve a public good. And it needs to look beyond cost and revenue a little bit. One of the things that I've talked to about them, and I know that several others in several of the other small cities are very hot on, is that if we had much smaller equipment, the size of C-VAN, or maybe even smaller, that we could run loop routes within our smaller cities, and that those loops could then serve major stations or transit points for the much larger equipment. The idea of taking that huge, 60-foot bus through the Washougal city streets is very limiting. One of the other well-known statistics is, with few exceptions, people will not walk more than a half a mile to a bus stop. So if you go up and back on the same route, you cover a very narrow band. If you go up and back on a loop route, you essentially double the number of people who are within a half a mile. But you can't take that big equipment up 39th Street past the high school and across on one of the other streets and then back down 32nd to Safeway or back down 49th and J to Safeway. And similarly, you could serve up in the western part of our city in Camas as well if you had loop routes. But this absolute fixed focus on large equipment and minimizing operating expenses without paying any attention to the public good of ridership, that leaves me some real heartburn. And so I think that adding the other small cities is a good idea. And the veto obviously has to go. I mean, my understanding is that that's, maybe I'm wrong, but I understood you to say that if the board composition changes at all, then the veto disappears under the existing agreements.
Changes in regards to the county and/or the city and/or both of them. The
Okay.
city being Vancouver. But the small cities also have a veto capability, but it's only on expenditures.
Right.
It's never been instituted.
Yeah, I did read the packet you sent out. So on the one hand, if I kind of take my Washougal hat off and say, you know, if we want to talk proportional representation, if I look at that, we do not, because we lose that argument. On the other hand, I think that there has been, as you said, a very narrow focus on this very large equipment on up and back routes, and that has been much to the detriment of the utility of CTRAN.
Okay, Joe.
Well, then their next step is to go into bus rapid transit, which is going to narrow this big bus thing on only just one street. And the rest of the counties, the funding will be focused on the one street, Fourth Plain, and the rest of the county fixed routes will just begin to wane because all of these funds are going to be funneled over there. So again, the small cities, we're never going to see attention given to these smaller vehicles when they're so busy funding and operating, maintaining the large bus system.
I'm just spitballing here, but in Puerto Rico, they have a very interesting system. They have what they call guaguas, which are the big buses. But they also, I forget the Spanish word, but they also have these vans, which are actually private, but run on fixed routes, and they carry people from up in the hills in the small little settlements down the hill to meet the major bus routes. And it may be that there's a private solution here that makes more sense than CTRAN. You run into problems under existing Washington law as to whether those are taxi cabs or not, but
We're starting to get away from the question, which is on the CTRAN board composition.
but the point is that they are very kind of hidebound and tunnel vision.
I'm not sure, this may or may not help your discussion. I'm not sure that the second option will stay alive in the composition board meeting. And the reason I say that, the Commissioner Milky put in a caveat that any cities, the original motion was that any cities that shared seats must agree to share seats and must be fine with all of that. And there was a lot of discussion on that. What it came down to is we kind of lessened that and said, because what that came down to was one city could veto everything if they didn't agree. So what they came down to, and the motion that passed, was that any city who has to share a vote with another jurisdiction, all should be in agreement. I know the city of Ridgefield has already met and voted. The city of La Center had a meeting 2 days after the last meeting we had to bring this up as well. They and Yacolt all started meeting immediately after that meeting to start talking about the option that has them all sharing, 3 cities, 2 cities and a town sharing a seat, and they all agreed to do that. And I understand the reason that they agreed to do that was all 3 of them only have connector routes. They don't have bus service. They have only connector routes, and it only made sense for them to do that, so they were going to stay together in the solidarity vote of the 3 of them staying together. So I don't know what that will do on the 2nd if the proposal starts to go forward of 2 representatives for the county, 2 representatives for Vancouver. That option has a representative for Ridgefield, of which Ridgefield is willing, is ready to turn back and say, we don't want one. And Yacolt and Le Center also do not want us to have one, we want to share one. So that's going to complicate things a little bit.
Seems like the little cities should be able to say, we want Vancouver to have 2, and we want the county to have 2, so let's let Ridgefield do it for the sake of that. I mean, I would like to see that as a representation
Yeah, I
of
believe
us.
that Ridgefield, Le Center, and Yacolt are going to back away from that one, which from the vote that was taken is probably going to crumble that one, especially for the reason that it was given.
Why would someone not want it?
And
Because they don't feel that they need one, and they would rather be aligned. I guess it's conceivable that the board could shrink and just one
There we
seat
go.
not be used.
Yeah.
It-
It could be, we could find another governmental body, not, I mean, not
All
necessarily,
state law,
well, they added a union man.
not a voting member.
Oh, you're right. Sorry.
There's only 9 seats.
What am I
by state
thinking?
law.
I would observe that population and revenue, roughly speaking, if Vancouver were a 3, the county would be a 2. And just for me personally, I do not like the way things are now, and I would be happy with either option 2 or 3, whatever we can get.
I think for the most part, most of the discussion so far, with the exception of the representative from Vancouver, is that the sentiment is against the block veto. So
Yeah.
I think most people want that to go away,
I'm-
regardless what else happens.
And I'm sure if I were the Vancouver representative, I'd want to keep
Want
it.
to keep that. Dave?
I noticed that the mayor of Vancouver is on record recently to try to get Vancouver committed to do the light rail. I'm sure that even if he gets the money from Vancouver at some point, the rest of us will all be invited, and I use the term loosely, to contribute to the maintenance of light rail on the idea that we supposedly benefit. Just briefly, and I know this is, you mentioned it was off the subject, I think light rail's a financial disaster. It's a 19th century technology, and we don't need it. It's expensive, and the capital costs that you mentioned, Paul,
They're astronomical.
they are, and the feds will pay between 50 and 100% the first time around. But 30 years down the pike, not only all of your rolling stock, but your facilities have to be replaced. And the feds are not going to have the money to do that 30 years from now. And in fact, the bill is coming due for those systems that started up in 1985 to 1990. That'll come due between 2015 and 2020. And I don't know of a single one of these systems outside of 4 cities in this country, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, and San Francisco, that have put the money aside to pay for that capital costs. And so these systems are going to fall apart very rapidly. I don't want to join that parade, I really don't. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Which is why we, smaller cities, would like to keep Vancouver from having that 3rd seat.
Amen, thank you, I forgot to point that out.
To wrap that all up,
Thoughts from other council members? Jennifer?
I do have a quick question. On the number 2 choice or proposal, if Vancouver has 3 seats and Ridgefield, Le Center, Yacolt share a seat, Vancouver and Clark County would still lose their block veto power. So what is your objection?
Vancouver's still going to have a 3rd vote. And it'll still be top-heavy for light rail, because that's what they're pushing for. That's where they're going to take us. And if they have
Top-heavy as far as,
towards light rail,
I'm
On-
not sure, I'm not understanding what your top-heavy is. They only have 3 votes out of 9 if that one survives.
their 3 to my 1, to our 1, makes it top-heavy in that respect. Because they will always vote for light rail. The smaller cities would probably, some will say yes and some will say no. I'm just saying, 3 votes, a guarantee for light rail, that's out of balance in my opinion.
All I need is 2 more, and they can get them.
If they have Clark County 2 and Vancouver has 3, then they still have the majority of votes. So it's only the third one that really takes that away from them. Where Vancouver has 2 and Clark has 2.
Mr. Mayor, can we get a straw poll here?
You can do more than a straw poll.
I was going to ask if we could vote.
Do a vote.
I would like to vote so you could go and represent that for us.
Great idea.
Do you have
I'd
any
like to make a
more
motion?
council member comments at this
Oh,
point?
sure.
I've not heard from every council member, so I
Yeah,
really like to know.
I concur with Dave and Connie Jo. I mean, I would vote for number 3 just to, level the playing field. So,
I'd like to make a motion.
You're not going to comment.
Can I make a motion at this time?
Sure.
I would like to make a motion that we select number 3 and ask the mayor to represent third option at the CTRAN, what's it called?
Composition Board.
Composition Board, thank you, on behalf of Washougal.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Any additional council discussions?
I just want my vote recorded as an abstention. I don't have a legal conflict of interest here, but I just think for appearance's sake, I shouldn't participate in this.
Do you have an employer that might,
Oh, I'm not worried about that. I just don't think I should participate, because I hear things around my workplace about this.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
A point of information, please. Did we or did we not change the rules so that abstentions are no longer counted as affirmative votes?
I would just count it as a non-vote.
We did.
Yep.
It's a non-vote?
I don't want my colleague to get caught by that.
Understood.
I'll be right back.
Not a problem. Understood completely.
he was
Any
out of the
other
room.
discussion? Okay, I've got a motion and a second to take option 3, which is Clark County having 2 votes, Vancouver having 2 votes, Battleground 1, Camas 1, Washougal 1, Ridgefield 1, La Center, and Yakult sharing 1.
And
is there,
block veto's gone?
It goes,
Block veto's gone?
nothing you do is going to change any of that. That's by their own rules, so.
Can we add a little freedom if Ridgefield doesn't want their seat?
I was going to ask about that next,
Okay,
after this vote.
we'll vote on that.
So everybody understand what your motion is?
Actually, let's just amend the motion
I was going to say,
to say first choice
Okay.
is number 3,
yeah, and then
and
Second choice is number,
diminish the seats to number 8.
I don't remember what order I gave them to you, and I think.
I'd rather have less seat,
Okay, all right.
less members than Vancouver having 3 votes.
So we just don't want the status quo one. But number 1 is the 2-2, 1-1-1-1-1-1-1-1-1-1. Okay? Everybody understand that?
What? No.
On number 3.
Please repeat that.
If I understand your amended motion, it is for your first recommendation and vote to be for Clark County to have 2 representatives, Vancouver 2, Battleground 1, Camas 1, Washougal 1, Ridgefield 1, La Center, and Yakult sharing 1.
Yes.
And that's
If that fails,
3?
No.
it's option whatever you have on there. I have them differently
it's
from the
number
way
3.
Tran gave them to me because I started with the status quo rather than the way that they ended with it. And then if that doesn't work, then our vote is for Clark County 2, Vancouver 3, Battleground 1, Camas 1, Washougal 1, Ridgefield, La Center, and
No.
Yakult sharing 1.
No.
Then
What
the
I
status
reckon-
quo is your backup?
No, that we would actually diminish the number of members on the board. You brought that up a moment ago, that Vancouver 2, Clark County 2, Ridgefield, La Center, and Yakult sharing, the other cities having 1, would mean we would only have 8 members.
I see that one going down in flames.
Well,
And
that's,
not even making it as a, well, it's not a proposal that anybody else has even taken back to their council.
you brought it up here earlier, and so I know if you've thought of it, others have thought of it. And you would have some agreement there.
It's just as a point of discussion, I think, I just want to give the mayor some wiggle room, so that if our preferred alternative is not going to go anywhere, he has a little bit of room to negotiate.
Well, in what direction? Wiggle room which way?
Well, we clearly want to get rid of the veto, the block
That's already a
veto.
done deal.
We clearly would like to see Clark County go from 2 to 1, from 3 to 2. And we clearly would like individual representatives from Camas Washougal Battleground, and then some kind of resolution for Ridgefield, Yakult, and La Center. Whatever works there is kind of where there's wiggle room, I think.
You haven't
But-
mentioned whether you clearly want Vancouver to have 3 or 2.
Well, I think we pretty clearly say 2.
Okay,
That's your first option.
yeah.
On the other hand,
But I'm
Would
just
we-
trying to prepare, what would we say if we were at the table? You're going to be at the table. If Ridgefield absolutely says, no, we don't want a seat.
I don't think it's just going to be Ridgefield. I think it's going to be La Center and Yakult backing them up, saying no. And I think the other small cities are probably going to go along with them and say, we said at the last meeting, and Commissioner Milky is the one that pushed for it, that they had to be in agreement. If they're not, I believe that one's going to leave the table.
Maybe I'm confused. In agreement to be a team?
Share or not share seats.
But if they want to turn their seat in, why should they be counted in the tally of the vote?
I think if your first one goes forward, my belief is those 3 cities are going to object to it, which because of the motion that was made, which was unique, will probably cause the others to say, yep, that's what he said. We all had to be in agreement or not, so
Well, I thought it went from they must and into
should.
should. That doesn't mean they have to.
Nope, it doesn't, but
and it's,
We want you to fight for us.
I've got yours no matter what, depending on how this goes. I'm willing to bring up reduce the seats by 8. I'm pretty sure I will get those words out. It's probably the last we'll hear of it, which. So do I understand then that your motion is for your first proposal for it, and it's all or nothing?
Yeah, for number 3. It's all or nothing.
Time to fall on our
For
sword.
your third.
well, see, I've got a problem with that, because, to use a very different model, if you're sending delegates to a national nominating convention, they are tied to a candidate for the first ballot. But if that candidate has no chance of winning, then you don't want your representatives to walk out of the room. You want them to get the best deal that they can for their community. And so while I would, it makes sense to say to the mayor, we want you to press for and vote for what we've been calling option 3 on the first ballot. If that fails, then there's a negotiation that has to take place, and we need a seat at that negotiation. We don't want to just walk out of the room because we're all or nothing.
No, I don't disagree with that. Now.
Let's not let
do
this
you-
composition board think they're the national committee, though. Let's not do that.
It's like their heads are big enough. Whoa. Do you think, I think there could be another recommendation. These aren't going to be the only recommendations. These are the only three. This is all we have to work with.
That's all you have to work with at this point.
There
That
could
was,
be others brought up next
well,
time.
the point of the meetings up to this point was to get proposals on the table that individual representatives were to take back to their jurisdictions, get input on, to come back to vote. There certainly could be more go on the table. They won't be voted on the 10th.
Right.
Nothing would be voted, likely nothing would be voted on the 10th. Well, there could. I may be the only one that stands up and says, nope, if you got more coming on the table, we should all go back and talk to our representatives, and everybody else may say,
Unless
Washougal, you
it's
go do
yours.
whatever you're gonna do, we're voting, and go that direction. I can also take just your selected one and vote for that one and vote no on any others and let it go at that. Now, there's different ways you can do it. I don't believe anybody is envisioning, but that's not to say that they couldn't, to come back with more proposals. If they do, it just lengthens by at least one more meeting, which would put us into October, and I don't think there's no time certain on when this composition committee has to finish their work. It's not like we've got to be done by the end of the year or the end of September or anything else. It's the review, it's underway. Dave?
Do we have a motion on the floor? Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there a second?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Move to call the question.
Well, that's what I'm still trying to figure out exactly. I know what the motion started out as, and then I think the motion was amended.
Well, we can amend it after we get it voted on.
With all due respect, the correct order is that you amend it before you vote on it.
I'm opposed to the amendment. That's why I'm saying that.
How do we remove that amendment?
If you want to go back to your original motion, then,
Was I officially the amendee?
no, well, you had to because it was your motion.
So I would go back to the original motion then. We'll deal with that.
You okay with that? You're the second. You're the second that I wrote down. There was like
yes.
3 of you.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion is to go for option number 3, which is 2 seats for Vancouver, 2 seats for Clark County, 1 for Battleground, 1 for Camas, 1 for Washougal, 1 for Ridgefield, and a shared representative between La Center and Yakult. Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Perfect. So I have a first position. If that one doesn't make it, I don't
Not
know.
yet.
We might be. If that one doesn't make it through and another one comes up, do you want me just to vote no on anything else that comes up and leave this one as your only? The votes are going to be yes or no. Or they're going
And
to be
these are our
for,
options.
or they're going to be for specific proposals.
Well,
Boy.
it seems to me you know what we want and where we're trying to get. And with that on the table, then you should have the ability to try and get us there.
Okay.
I think that's what you're talking about, the flexibility.
One of the good things for us, so far, I believe the only 2 that are really probably going to go forward have Washougal having their individual seat. We
Yes.
do pretty well without having kicked any dogs in the fight so far, so. Dave?
Success goes to those who strike boldly. Strike boldly, Mr. Mayor.
Okay? Okay. I have some marching orders. We will have another council meeting before that. We'll have a council meeting on the 9th, and this meeting is on the 10th. So if you want to revisit this, we can certainly do that. Nothing's going to happen between now and then, so. Okay, thank you. That's all that I have.
Thank you.
Items from
Thank you for
council
doing
members.
this.
Brent?
This is a little bit of a touchy subject, but 2 weeks ago, the Columbian had some discussion on the seasonal worker issue, and I don't want to get into the seasonal worker issue at all tonight, on council members and their ability to talk to staff, or staff approaching council on some issue of concern they have. And one of the concerns I have is I think at any time, any city employee ought to be able to talk to us about a matter of city policy. And I'd be interested in a workshop on exactly what the power of council is in its legislative role to communicate with city employees, management, on down to street workers. And so one of I would be interested in possibly adopting an ordinance that sets forth that policy. And so I'd like a workshop on that as soon as possible.
Anything else?
That's it.
Karen?
Nothing, thanks.
Paul?
I'd also like to bring up for workshop reexamination of Bill number 4412, which was passed as a resolution, but I don't have the resolution number. It was on the agenda of May 21st, 2012.
What was that one on?
The title is Resolution Contract and Agreements Approval Thresholds and Procurement Policies.
Okay. Anything else, Paul?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Joyce?
Well, I have nothing, but I would like to thank everybody with your presentations this evening. They were lengthy. The budget particularly helps. Thank you very much.
Jennifer?
Yes, I would also like to request to have a discussion about the what-ifs in the event of the passage of Proposition 1, pardon me, and is the city prepared for that bill to pass, or that proposition to pass? And I want to talk about transitions as far as the city and how we would transition to a council manager form of government, and just in general, legalities, what would happen at the administrative level, et cetera, so we can have an open discussion as a council and citizens, et cetera.
It would have been great to have that discussion earlier. Dave?
Yes.
Hey, Connie Joe?
It's been a quiet couple of weeks, city-wise. I have nothing.
Okay, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Do we have any?
So
We have an
moved.
executive
we have
session.
any-
Oh, sorry about that. I was still trying to get us out of here. We do have an executive
So
session.
moved.
We have an executive session on potential litigation. No action to follow. I would think it's going to take us probably at least 30 minutes, but should be no more than 30 minutes. No, we don't have to go 30.
Don't look at me.
15 minutes.
I mean, I know what the topic is, and I don't think it should go that long.
Are we staying here?
Dave, where would you like to do it?
Look, they're all leaving.
They are out of here.